Hello there, and welcome back to the Sleepy Nova Chronicles. Before the first stone was laid on the first wall of the first house in Ireland, the island already had a name. Not a name given by the people who would come to live on it. Not the Celts, not the Bronze Age farmers, not the Mesolithic hunter-gatherers who crossed the land bridge from Britain 12,000 years ago, when the sea had not yet risen to separate the islands. A name given by the island itself, or by whatever presence inhabited it before any human foot had pressed into its soft, dark soil. The Irish called it Innis Fail, the island of destiny, not because anyone decided it should be destined for greatness, because they could feel it, in the specific, old, bone-deep way that certain landscapes communicate their character to the people who inhabit them. The way a particular hillside holds light differently from the surrounding land. The way a river pool produces a stillness that the flowing water on either side of it does not. The way the mist on certain mornings does not seem to be descending from the sky but rising from the ground, as though the island itself is exhaling. Ireland breathes. That is what the old tales are really about. Not the monsters, though there are monsters. Not the battles, though there are battles so vast and so long that the ground still holds their memory in the specific, crop-mark-revealing, dry summer archaeology of the Great Plain of Meath. Not even the gods, though the gods of the Irish mythological tradition, the Tuatha Dé Danann, the people of the goddess Danu, are as specific and as personal and as present in the landscape as any supernatural beings in any mythological tradition on earth. The old Irish tales are about the otherworld. Tir na Nog, the land of the ever-young, the place beyond the ninth wave where time moves differently, where the dead are not dead but transformed, where beauty does not fade and music does not stop, and the feast is always full, and the light is always the specific, amber, late afternoon light of a perfect summer evening that never tips over into dark. The otherworld is not above the sky or below the earth. It is beside you. Tonight, in the dark, in the specific weight and warmth of the hour between wakefulness and sleep, it is closer than it has been all day. The old Irish understood that the boundary between this world and the other world is thinnest at night. Thinnest in the dark. Thinnest in that specific, liminal, half-dreaming state when the body has gone still but the mind has not yet gone under, and the images that arrive are not quite thoughts, and not quite dreams but something else. Something older. Something that does not have a name in modern English, but that the old Irish called the faith, the visionary gift, the capacity to see what is beside rather than what is ahead. You are in the faith right now. Allow your shoulders to soften. Let your breathing find its own pace. Not controlled, not directed, just the slow, fire-warmed, night-deepened breath of someone who has come in from the cold and found a seat close to the hearth and has nowhere else to be and nothing else to do except listen to what the night brings. Tonight the night brings stories. From the oldest island in the northwest of the world. From the people who knew its name before they gave it one. Let's begin. Before Ireland was Ireland, it was invaded. Not once. Not by a single people arriving from a single direction with a single purpose. 5 times. 5 successive waves of mythological peoples arriving on the island's shores, each one displacing or absorbing the one before, each one bringing with them a different relationship to the land and to the specific, luminous, unpredictable power that the land contained. The Liber Gabler Iren, the Book of the Taking of Ireland, records these invasions with a specific, systematic, almost genealogical precision of a tradition that understood that knowing where you came from was not merely historical curiosity but the foundation of knowing who you were. The first people were the Cessair. They came before the flood and were destroyed by it. Then the Partholonians, who cleared the plains and drained the lakes and began the slow, agricultural work of making the wild island habitable, and who were destroyed by plague so completely that not one of them survived. Then the Nemedians, who fought the Fomorians, the dark, formless, primordial forces of chaos and the deep sea, and lost, and scattered to the 4 corners of the world to lick their wounds and learn and eventually return as 3 separate peoples. The Fir Bolg, who farmed the land and divided it into provinces and gave it the specific political geography that the historical Irish would inherit. And then, arriving in a cloud of mist from the northern islands of the world where they had been learning their arts in 4 cities whose names were Phélias and Gorias and Phineas and Murias. The Tuatha Dé Danann, the people of the goddess Danu, the gods. They did not arrive by sea in the conventional sense. The Liber Gabala says they came in dark clouds, landing on the mountains of Connaught, the mountains of the west, the wild Atlantic-facing mountains where the mist is so thick on certain mornings that the line between the cloud and the ground dissolves entirely, and you could walk into either without knowing which you had chosen. They burned their ships behind them, not in the specific military tactics sense of cutting off retreat. In the mythological sense, the sense of a people who had come to a place they intended to be permanent and who did not need a way back because the only direction that mattered now was forward, into the land that was already, in some sense, theirs. They brought 4 treasures with them. From each of the 4 northern cities, 1 treasure. From Phélias, the Leofeil, the Stone of Destiny, the coronation stone that cried out under the feet of every rightful king of Ireland, a stone that could feel legitimacy and express it in sound, not metaphorically. In the mythological reality of the tradition, the stone cried. Its cry was the specific, resonant, stone-deep sound of a landscape recognizing the person who was meant to stand on it, recognizing them not through any political or legal process, but through the direct, immediate, unarguable perception of the stone itself, which had been feeling the feet of kings and pretenders for long enough to know the difference. From Gorias, the spear of Luff, the spear of the sun god, the weapon that could not miss its target and that, once thrown, could not be stopped, the spear that carried in its trajectory the specific, straight, undeviating certainty of sunlight moving from the sun to the thing it illuminates. No darkness stood between the spear's departure and its arrival. No obstacle changed its course. The spear was not a weapon in the ordinary sense. It was a principle, the principle of absolute, inevitable consequence. The thing thrown always arrives. From Phineas, the sword of Nuada, the sword from which no one escaped once it was drawn, a weapon whose very unsheathing was a declaration so final and so complete that the drawing itself was the victory, the cutting simply the confirmation of something already decided. And from Murias, the most extraordinary of the 4 treasures, the one that feels least like a weapon and most like a world, the Dagda's cauldron. The cauldron of the Dagda, a vessel from which no company ever went away hungry. Not a magical food-producing device in the fairy tale sense of a pot that never empties. Something deeper and stranger and more philosophically consequential than that. The cauldron satisfied not the hunger of the body alone, but the specific, deeper hunger of the group. The hunger that comes from being together without enough to share, from the specific social anxiety of a feast that might not reach everyone, from the fear that the abundance of the world is finite and that someone, somewhere, will go without. The cauldron eliminated that fear, not by producing infinite food, by producing precisely enough. Whatever company gathered around it, the cauldron produced exactly what was needed for all of them to be satisfied. Exactly enough. No more. No waste. No hierarchy of who ate first and who ate last and who went without. The cauldron was the principle of sufficiency, the principle that the world, given the right relationship between its people, produces enough for everyone who comes to the table. You know this principle. You have felt it at a specific meal in your life, a meal where the company was right and the food was enough and the fire or the light or the warmth of the room and the specific, unrepeatable combination of the people around you produced the feeling that this is what plenty actually means. Not excess. Not abundance so overwhelming that it becomes meaningless. Exactly enough. The cauldron feeling. The Dagda himself was the most remarkable of the Tuatha Dé Danann. His name means the good god, but good in the Irish sense means good at things, not morally virtuous. The Dagda was good at everything. He was the master of all the skills and crafts and arts and wisdoms that the Tuatha Dé Danann possessed, and he was not modest about this. He was enormous, described in the tales as dressed in a short brown tunic that barely covered his body, dragging his enormous club behind him on a wheel, the club so large that it carved a furrow in the earth as he dragged it, a furrow that became the boundary of territories. He was simultaneously comic and magnificent. He ate from a cauldron of porridge large enough to feed the armies of Ireland, using a ladle the size of a man and a woman lying down together, and he ate it all, every drop, and it was not enough, and he ate it again. The Dagda was excessive. His excess was his divinity, not the elegant, restrained, proportioned divinity of the Greek gods, those beautiful, perfectly formed, self-aware immortals whose divinity expressed itself in the specific aesthetic register of the sculptor and the architect and the philosopher. The Dagda's divinity expressed itself in the specific, overwhelming, can't help it register of pure life force. He was too much because life itself is too much. Because the world doesn't produce a carefully measured, aesthetically appropriate quantity of experience. It produces a torrent, a flood, a club-dragging, cauldron-eating, furrow-gouging excess that is simultaneously ridiculous and the most real thing that has ever happened to you. The Dagda's club had two ends. One end killed. The other end restored to life those it had killed. He carried both ends with him at all times. This was not a contradiction that the tradition felt the need to resolve. It was simply a description of the function that the Dagda performed in the mythological ecosystem, the function of the principle of life itself, which both generates and destroys, which gives and takes with the same hand, which contains in its single instrument the capacity for the whole cycle. The monster of the Dagda is this function, not his appearance, not the comic enormity of his body or his appetite. The function, the specific, irreducible, philosophically complete function of an entity that embodies the total cycle of life without privileging either the generating or the destroying end. The Dagda does not pretend that the club only has one end. He drags the whole thing with him everywhere he goes. As life drags its whole range with it everywhere life goes. In you. In the specific, whole cycle, both ends present truth of a life that contains joy and grief, energy and exhaustion, the meal that satisfies and the night that empties, all of it carried together, on the same wheel, through the same landscape. Now meet the Morrigan. She is the one that the modern imagination finds most difficult to hold without flinching. The Morrigan, the great queen, the phantom queen, the triple goddess of sovereignty and war and fate, is not a battle goddess in the sense that Ares is a battle god. Ares is the personification of the violence of battle, the specific, blood and iron, physical ferocity of close combat. The Morrigan is the personification of something older and stranger and more completely terrifying than violence. She is the personification of destiny, the specific, irreversible, already decided quality of the thing that is going to happen to you whether you choose it or not. She appears at the ford, always at the ford, the river crossing, the specific, liminal, between one place and another geography of the shallow crossing point where the warrior must cross the water to reach the battle. She appears as an old woman washing the clothes of those who are about to die in the battle ahead. If your armor is among the clothes she is washing, you are already dead. The battle has not yet happened. The swords have not yet been drawn. But she is washing your armor in the cold water of the ford, and what she knows is not prophecy in the predictive sense, not a seeing ahead of what might be. What she knows is what already is, because the Morrigan exists outside the linear time that the living experience. From where she stands at the ford, the battle is already over. The dead are already dead. The survivors are already surviving. She is not washing the clothes of the dead as a warning or a curse. She is simply doing the work that needs to be done, the preparation for the transition, the washing clean of what has been lived in and will be lived in no more. She is grief before the event, the specific, bone-cold, truth-knowing grief that arrives not after a loss but in the moment when the loss becomes inevitable. In the moment at the ford, the moment when you know, with a specific, body-wide, unmistakable certainty that the deep body produces, that something is ending. You have stood at the ford. Not in the mythological landscape of ancient Ireland, in the specific, private, interior landscape of your own life. At the moment when a relationship became unsalvageable, at the moment when a door closed permanently, at the moment when something you were hoping would not end ended. The specific, cold, still, absolutely certain feeling of the ford. The Morrigan was there, not as an external entity, as the name for the feeling itself, the old tradition's way of giving a face and a form to the specific quality of grief before the event, of making it something that could be addressed and honored rather than simply endured. She comes to Cú Chulainn 3 times. 3 times she crosses his path in the guises of a young woman, a crow, and an old hag at the ford, and 3 times he fails to recognize her, and 3 times his failure to recognize her seals his fate more completely than any weapon could. The tragedy of Cú Chulainn, the specific, Irish, mythological tragedy that is as heartbreaking as any in world literature, and that has been shaping the Irish understanding of heroism and mortality for 2,000 years, is not that he is killed. Every hero dies. The tragedy is that he cannot see what stands before him. He sees strength and youth and his own reflection. He does not see the grief that already knows his name. But here, in the specific, comfortable darkness of tonight, you do not need to see the Morrigan at the ford. You have already passed it. The day is behind you. Whatever the day contained, whatever of ending and beginning and loss, and the small, daily, unglamorous negotiations between what you wanted and what arrived, it is already washed, already deposited at the ford, already known. You do not need to carry it into the night. The Morrigan has it. It is in her hands at the crossing, and the crossing is behind you now. Now follow the Tuatha Dé Danann to the battle that determines whether they will hold the island or lose it. The first battle of Mag Tuired, the Plain of Pillars, where they face the Fir Bolg for the sovereignty of Ireland. The battle lasted 4 days. Not the 4 days of a conventional military campaign. 4 days in the mythological sense, which means 4 complete cycles of everything a battle is. The first day was the day of formation, of the armies facing each other across the plain of Connacht with a specific, held breath, about to begin quality of a world pausing before it changes. The second day was the day of first contact, of the individual combats between champions that determined the specific, symbolic terms on which the larger battle would be fought. The third day was the day of the battle itself, the collision of the 2 hosts, the crash of shield on shield, and the specific, heavy, iron-on-iron sound of a battle that the crows could hear from 3 days' flight away. The fourth day was the day of decision, the day when the outcome became clear and the battle passed from the realm of uncertain contest into the realm of the Morrigan's already known conclusion. The Tuatha Dé Danann won, but their king, Nuada, lost his arm, and this single, specific physical loss, the king's right arm severed in combat, produced a constitutional crisis that the mythological tradition treats with the same seriousness that a modern democracy would treat the incapacitation of its head of state. Because the law of the Tuatha Dé Danann required that their king be physically perfect. A king with a severed arm could not rule. Not because the tradition was cruel or arbitrary about this requirement. Because the king's body was understood to be the body of the land, the specific, physical, living correspondence between the ruler's wholeness and the land's fertility that is the deepest and most fundamental of the Irish mythological tradition's political principles. A damaged king meant a damaged land. The crops would fail. The rivers would run thin. The cattle would not calve. The specific, biological, weather-dependent, agricultural relationship between the human community and the land it inhabited would break down, because the mediating principle, the king whose body was the land's body, whose health was the land's health, whose wholeness guaranteed the land's wholeness, was no longer whole. This is not superstition. It is, in its mythological form, an extraordinarily sophisticated understanding of the relationship between leadership and the health of the community it serves. The requirement of the king's physical wholeness is the myth's way of saying, the person who holds power over a community must not be broken in a way that prevents them from seeing and serving the community's needs. The myth externalizes the damage, puts it on the body where everyone can see it, rather than allowing it to remain hidden in the internal, psychological, invisible damage that leaders carry and that leadership produces. If the king is damaged, the land suffers. If the leader is broken, the community breaks. Every community you have ever been part of has known this, has felt the specific agricultural, crop-failing quality of a community whose central principle is compromised, whether that community is a family or a workplace or a friendship group or a nation. The failure of the harvest when the king's arm is severed is the myth's name for the way a damaged center produces damaged edges. The physician god Gen Sect made Nuada a silver arm, perfect in every function, silver in every surface, moving exactly as a flesh arm moves, but not flesh, not the original wholeness. And so, by the law of the tradition, Nuada could not yet return to the kingship, not because the silver arm was insufficient, but because the tradition understood that restored function is not the same as original wholeness, and that the distinction matters. Later, Gen Sect's son Mayak would restore Nuada's actual flesh arm, growing the original back, bone by bone and sinew by sinew and skin by skin, in the specific, miraculous, medically impossible restoration that mythology reserves for the moments when the tradition wants to say, sometimes the wound is completely healed. Not compensated for. Not worked around. Healed. The silver arm gives way to the flesh arm, and Nuada returns to the kingship, and the land recovers. Your own body heals in the same sequence every night that you sleep, not from severed arms, from the daily, accumulated, metabolic, cellular damage of living. The restoration that sleep provides is not the silver arm of compensation. It is the flesh arm of actual repair, the cellular, molecular, protein synthesis-driven restoration of the tissue that the day depleted, conducted in the dark, while you are not watching, producing by morning the specific, rested, genuinely restored rather than merely compensated quality of a body that has been allowed to do its deepest maintenance work. The flesh arm grows back, while you sleep, as it always has, as Mayak always intended. He was also his father's son, which meant he was a hunter in the deep forests of Ireland, a man who knew the specific, pre-dawn, dew-on-the-fern quality of a forest at the moment when the deer are still moving and the light is still deciding what color it intends to be. He knew the weight of a spear and the specific, held-breath moment before the throw. He knew the sound of the hounds and the smell of the river and the particular quality of tiredness that comes at the end of a day that has been spent entirely in the body. The good tiredness, the earned tiredness, the tiredness that makes sleep feel like a gift rather than a concession. He did not know that he was about to leave all of it. She came from the west, across the water, because in Irish mythology, everything significant comes from the west. The west is the direction of the other world, the direction of the setting sun and the ninth wave and the specific, Atlantic, weather-bearing, light-changing quality of a sky above an ocean that goes on until it becomes something else. She came riding a white horse, the specific, luminous, slightly too perfect white of a horse that has never been dirty, that carries itself with the specific confidence of an animal whose entire body is the argument for its own existence. Her name was Niamh of the golden hair, and she came for Oisin, not because she had seen him from afar and been struck by him in the way of conventional romantic narrative, the distant seeing, the falling, the pursuit. She came because she already knew him, because in the other world, knowledge operates differently from knowledge in this world. In this world, you learn about a person by encountering them over time, by watching how they move through the world across many different situations, by the slow, accumulative, evidence-based process of coming to understand another person that takes years and is never quite complete. In the other world, you simply know. Niamh knew Oisin the way the stone of Fale knew the rightful king, not through observation but through resonance. The specific, immediate, impossible to argue with recognition of the thing that belongs to you. She asked him to come with her. Oisin's father Finn, the great leader, the wise old warrior whose name means fair or white, and who was already old in the way of a man who has seen everything. Finn knew what was happening. He knew what it meant when someone came from the west on a white horse. He did not try to stop Oisin. He did not argue or forbid or impose the authority of the father and the leader. He simply looked at his son with a specific, clear-eyed, grief-knowing look of a man who recognizes the ford and knows he is not the one crossing it. He let him go. The horse carried them across the water. They passed the ninth wave, the specific, mythologically significant ninth wave, the threshold beyond which Ireland became invisible and the otherworld became real. Not a gradual transition. A crossing. One moment Ireland was still there, its grey-green hills still visible behind them through the sea mist. Then the ninth wave. Then not there. Then Tir Nog, rising from the water ahead of them in the specific, amber, never-quite sunset light of a world that exists permanently in the warmth between afternoon and evening. The land of the ever-young. Tir Nog was not a paradise in the religious sense, not a reward given by a divine authority in exchange for correct behavior. It was a place, a specific, geographical, physically real place in the mythological geography of the Irish tradition, a place with weather and landscape and architecture and other inhabitants, a place where things happened and time passed and the specific, ordinary texture of lived experience continued. The difference was the aging. In Tir Nog, nobody aged. Not because they were immortal in the death cannot touch them sense. Because time in Tir Nog moved differently. A year in the otherworld was not the same duration as a year in Ireland. The seasons turned, the light changed. The feast followed the hunt, followed the music followed. The feast. But the biological clock that measures a human body's relationship to time ran at a different speed in Tir Nog. Or perhaps ran at the speed it was always meant to run, and that the harsh, weather-dependent, predator-haunted reality of the mortal world had forced it to accelerate beyond. In Tir Nog, the body had time. Time to recover. Time to restore. Time to allow the specific, cellular, molecular maintenance work of biological life to complete itself fully before the next demand was placed on the system. The body in Tir Nog was a body operating at the pace its own biology preferred, not the pace that survival necessity imposed. You are closest to Tir Nog when you sleep, not as a metaphor, as the specific, biological, measurably different from waking physiological state that sleep produces in your body, the state in which the cellular repair and the memory consolidation and the immune surveillance and the hormonal restoration that the waking body cannot fully complete while simultaneously managing the demands of consciousness proceed without competition. The sleeping body and the Tir Nog body are running the same program. The program of enough time. Oisin spent 3 years in Tir Nog. 3 years of the otherworld's time. 3 years of the feasts and the music and the specific, unhurried, sunlit all-the-time quality of a world that does not divide its days into the frantic and the exhausted. 3 years of Niamh. 3 years of a life so complete and so balanced and so free of the specific, grinding, weather and winter and wound and worry texture of mortal Ireland that the 3 years felt like 3 months. Or perhaps 3 centuries. It is never entirely clear in the myth how to measure otherworld time in mortal units. And this ambiguity is not a failure of the tradition to be precise. It is the tradition being exactly precise about the thing it is describing, the specific quality of time that feels both shorter and longer than it should, both concentrated and expanded, both used up and abundant. The time of total presence. When you are completely present in the best hours of your life, when you are in the specific, right place, right time, right person quality of an experience that feels simultaneously immediate and timeless. Time does not behave the way it does when you are waiting for something. It doesn't drag. It doesn't rush. It simply is. And when it ends, you cannot say precisely how long it lasted, because the normal measurement of duration requires a degree of absence from the experience that total presence prevents. Oisin was totally present in Tir Nanog for 3 years, or 3 centuries, until homesickness came. Homesickness is one of the oldest and most precisely understood of the human emotional experiences, and the Irish tradition treats it with the seriousness it deserves, not as a weakness or a failure to be fully present in the good thing, but as the specific, involuntary, unmanageable expression of the body's knowledge that it comes from a particular place, and that place is not here. The Irish word for it is cuma, a word with no precise English equivalent, carrying the specific combination of longing and grief and the physical sensation of something pulling in the chest that is not metaphorical but genuinely felt in the sternum, in the specific, aching geography of the body where the heart's location and the heart's meaning coincide. Cuma came for Oisin, not dramatically, not in the way of a sudden homesickness that arrives with full force and demands immediate action. Slowly, the way the tide rises on a flat beach, so gradually that you do not notice it until the water is already at your feet. In small details, the specific way the light fell at a certain time of evening in Ireland and nowhere else. The smell of the particular mix of soil and heather and salt air that is the west of Ireland and nothing but the west of Ireland. The sound of the hounds in the early morning, and the sound of his father's voice, and the sound of the spear leaving his hand, and the specific, physical, muscle memory pleasure of a throw that has gone true. He asked Niamh to let him visit Ireland. She knew what this meant. She knew because she knew him, because the otherworld's knowledge works in both directions, knowing the thing you love and knowing the things that will take it from you. She knew that Oisin, once returned to Ireland's soil, would not be the same Oisin, that something would happen that could not be undone, that the crossing of the 9th wave in the homeward direction was a different crossing from the crossing in the outward direction, that you can leave a world in one state and return to it in a completely different one, and there is no way to prepare for the difference because the difference is not in the place you're returning to. The difference is in you. She gave him her white horse and a single instruction. Do not let your foot touch the ground. Do not dismount. Do not let the soil of Ireland receive the weight of you. Because if the soil of Ireland received the weight of him, if the specific, mortal, time-bound contract between a human body and the ground it was born on was re-established, then all the years that Tir Nanog had held in suspension would arrive at once. He promised. He crossed the 9th wave going home. And Ireland was not as he had left it. It is never as you left it. The 3 years of otherworld time had been 300 years of mortal time, 3 centuries during which Finn Mac Cumhale had died, and the Fianna had dispersed, and the hills that Oisin knew as the hunting grounds of his father's warriors had grown quiet with a specific, history over, era ended, overgrown quiet of a landscape that has moved on. The great halls were in ruins. The names of the Fianna were the names of legend to the people who now lived on the land. Even the landscape felt smaller and greyer and less luminous than he remembered, not because it had changed, but because he was seeing it now with eyes that had known Tir Nanog, and anything seems grey for a time after you have been somewhere where the light is always amber. He rode across Connaught looking for his father. He found only strangers. And then, because the myth needs its turning point, because every story of Paradise Lost needs its moment of irreversibility, he stopped to help. A group of men was struggling to move a large stone that had fallen across a path. Ordinary men, ordinary labor, the specific, heavy, physical, mortal work of moving weight from where it is to where it needs to be. Oisin leaned down from the white horse to lend his otherworld-given strength to the effort. The saddle girth broke. He fell. His foot touched the ground. The soil of Ireland received the weight of him. And 300 years arrived at once. Not slowly. Not in the gradual, merciful way of natural aging. All at once. The 300 years that Tir Nanog had held at bay arriving in the specific, instantaneous, biological delivery of every moment of time that a body is owed. The young warrior became an ancient old man in the time it takes to fall from a horse. He was found by Patrick. Saint Patrick in the tradition, the Christian Patrick, the bringer of the new faith, the man whose arrival in Ireland represented the specific, historical, 5th century turning point between the mythological Ireland of the Tuatha Dé Danann and the Fianna and the Otherworld, and the Christian Ireland of the monastery and the Book of Kells and the specific, illuminated, whale oil candle, vellum and oak gall tradition that preserved the old myths even as it replaced the belief system they had sustained. Patrick and Oisin talked for a long time about the old world and the new world, about Tir non Nog and heaven, about Finn Mac Cumhale and God the Father. The tradition records their conversations as a series of dialogues, the Gallam na Sinarach, the colloquy of the ancients, in which Oisin is simultaneously the last witness to a world that is gone and the most alive, most present, most unbroken person in the conversation. Patrick has the theology. Oisin has the memory. And the memory is of a world that was so beautiful and so specific and so irreplaceable that no theological consolation for its loss is fully adequate. Patrick offers heaven. Oisin remembers the sound of the hounds in the early morning in the hills of Connacht, when the dew was still on the fern and his father was alive, and the Fianna were whole, and the day's hunting was ahead. Heaven may be everything Patrick says it is, but it is not that. The myth does not resolve this tension. It holds it. The old world and the new world, the other world and the mortal world, the eternal and the temporal, the love that was total and the home that could not be returned to, all of it held together in the specific Irish, emotionally honest, theologically unresolved way of a tradition that understood that some losses cannot be made good and that the honest response to them is not consolation but memory. Memory, which is what you are doing right now, in the specific pre-sleep, hypnagogic, Tir non Nog state of a mind that is releasing the day's sharp edges and beginning the slow, warm, amberlit journey toward the part of your own inner landscape where the things you love are still as they were, where the people you miss are still themselves, where the places that shaped you are still there, where the hounds are still in the hills. Let the memory arrive, not with grief, with a specific, grateful, amberlit quality of a returning traveler who has been somewhere extraordinary and who, in the act of remembering, is briefly in both places at once, in Tir non Nog and in the dark, and both, for this moment, are home. There are stories that hurt because they are dramatic, and then there are stories that hurt because they are patient. The story of the children of Lyre is the second kind. It is not a story of violent catastrophe or sudden loss or the specific, instantaneous, irrevocable fall from the horse that ends Oisin's youth in a moment. It is a story of duration, of the specific, slow, grinding, time-measured quality of a suffering that is not intense but is very, very long. It is a story about what happens to people, what happens to their love for each other, their memory of who they were before, their capacity to find beauty in the circumstances that have been imposed on them, when the catastrophe is not a single event but a condition. 900 years. That is the duration of the children's transformation. 900 years as swans. Before we reach the swans, follow the family back to the beginning, to Lyre himself, one of the kings of the Tuatha Dé Danann in the period after the Second Battle of Mag Tuired, after the defeat of the Fomorians, in the specific post-war, who rules, what settling of the mythological landscape that follows every great conflict. Lyre was passed over for the high kingship. The position went to Bod Dirge instead, and Lyre nursed his grievance in his hall on the hill of the White Field in the province of Connacht with the specific, smouldering, private quality of a man who believes he deserved better and cannot quite let go of that belief. But Bod Dirge made peace with him. He gave Lyre his own daughter in marriage, Abe, the Radiant One, as both the political gesture of reconciliation and the genuine, warm-hearted gift of a father who believed his daughter would be happy with this difficult man. She was happy. They were happy. For children were born. 2 boys, Aegon, whose name means fire, and Fiocra, whose name carries the older meaning of the raven's shadow, and twin girls, Fionnuala and Con Fionnuala was the eldest of the four and the most significant, the sister who would hold the others together across the 900 years of transformation with a specific older sibling. I will let us break quality of a person who has decided that her job is to be the warm center of a group that the world is trying to freeze. This is important. Fionnuala's love for her brothers is not a romantic love, and not a parental love, and not the love of equals in the way that friendship is the love of equals. It is the specific, elder sibling love that is partly chosen and partly assigned and entirely real. The love that comes from having been there first, from having watched the others arrive, from having understood before they could understand it themselves that you were connected to them in a way that could not be undone by time or distance, or the specific, catastrophic, 900-year transformation of a stepmother's curse. Because Abe died, as people do. Liar's wife, the mother of the four children, died, and the specific, grief-collapsed, closed-off quality that Liar became in her absence is the myth's most recognizably human moment. Not the gods and their treasures. Not the battles across the plain of pillars. The father whose wife has died and who no longer knows how to be in the world. Bob Dirge gave him another daughter. Her name was Aoife. And here the myth becomes careful and specific and, if you are willing to hear it in the spirit in which it was told, not as a villain origin story but as the honest account of what happened to a particular woman in a particular set of circumstances, deeply compassionate. Aoife loved the children. The old tales say this clearly and without qualification. In the beginning, Aoife loved Fionnuala and Aegon and Fiocra and Con as if they were her own, with a specific step-parent love that is harder than the biological love in some ways because it is entirely chosen, because there is no evolutionary push behind it, because every act of care is a deliberate decision made against the awareness that these are not your children and you are not their mother, and the person who was their mother is gone, and her absence is present in the house every day. In the specific, grief-shaped space that a missing person leaves. Aoife loved them. And then the jealousy arrived. Not as a dramatic, sudden, villainy-deciding moment. As the slow, quiet, corrosive, gradual arrival of a feeling that she could not name at first, and then could name but could not stop, and then could not stop, and then had become the frame through which she saw everything. Liar did not turn toward her. He turned toward the children. In his grief for Abe, the children were his consolation, his continuation, his reason to remain in the world, and the specific, daily, tender and rough business of being a father was the thing that kept the grief from becoming total. He loved the children in the way of a man who has lost the person the children came from, and who sees that person in the children's faces every day. Which meant Aoife could not go anywhere in the house without being reminded of Abe. In the children's eyes. In Liar's love for them. In the specific, invisible, everywhere present reality of the first wife who was gone but not gone, whose place in the family's emotional landscape was so permanent that no living person could fully occupy it. This is not an excuse for what Aoife did. The tradition is not offering an excuse. It is offering an explanation, the specific, honest, tragedy-making distinction between what someone did and why they did it, and what those two things together tell us about the kind of world we live in. A world where good people do destructive things. Where love curdled by unacknowledged pain becomes something that harms the very things it originally reached toward. Where the monster is not an external creature arriving from outside the family, but the feeling that grew inside the person who was already there. Aoife took the four children to Lake Daravarag. On a bright morning. She told them they were going swimming. And at the lake's edge, she struck each of them with a druidic wand and spoke the words that transformed them. White swans, each of them, beating the cold air of the lakeshore with wings that had been arms moments before, crying out with voices that were still their own, still recognizably Fionnuala and Aegon and Fiocra and Con, just carried now in the body of a swan, just living now in the form that the jealousy and the grief and the unchecked, untreated, catastrophic accumulation of a feeling that had nowhere to go had imposed on them. 900 years, divided into 3 periods of 300 years each. 300 years on the lake of Derravarag in Westmouth. The still, cold, inland lake where their father and his people would come to the shore and speak with them across the water, where the transformation was fresh, and the grief was loud, and the family was still present even if unable to touch, where Fionn Waller sang to comfort her brothers, and the music she produced was so beautiful that all who heard it were healed of whatever troubled them and fell into a sweet, untroubled sleep. 300 years on the Straits of Moyle, the narrow, violent, storm-battered stretch of water between Ireland and Scotland, the specific, cold, grey, wave-crashed, no-shelter geography of the Irish Sea at its most inhospitable, where there was no shore that recognized them and no family to come to the water's edge, and where the storm separated them from each other, and the cold was not the cold of winter, but the cold of a world that does not care, the cold of the specific, indifferent. Storm-grey water that is beautiful from a distance and murderous up close. It was in the Straits of Moyle that Fionn Waller was most fully herself. When the storms came and scattered them, flung each of the 4 swans in a different direction across the grey water, it was Fionn Waller who found the rock. The specific, barely above the water, wave-washed, barely adequate rock that she claimed as the meeting point, the place where she would wait for the others, no matter how long, no matter what the water was doing. And when Aegon came first, exhausted and cold and wing-battered, she tucked him under her right wing. When Fiocra came, she tucked him under her left. When Con came last, shaking with cold, she covered him with her breast feathers and held all 3 of them against her body for warmth. One body keeping 3 others alive. Through the night. Through the storm. This is the story's truest moment. Not the transformation. Not the curse or the druidic wand or the 900 years of mythological duration. The sister on the rock in the storm, her wings spread over the brothers, she has decided she will not let die. Her own body as the only available warmth in the specific, cold, grey, indifferent geography of the Straits of Moyle. This is what love looks like when it is not being watched. When there is no audience, and no reward, and no reversal of fortune imminent, and no warm shore in sight. When it is simply a decision, the daily, recommitted, non-dramatic decision to be the warmth for the person who is cold, because the alternative is to let them be cold, and that is not something you are able to do. You have been on the rock, in one form or another. In the specific, private, unglamorous, nobody-is-watching version of the rock that your life has produced. The night you stayed when staying was hard, the warmth you provided when you had very little warmth left for yourself, the decision you made to be present for someone else when absence would have been easier and no one would have blamed you for it. Fionn Waller's Rock is the myth's name for that decision. The third 300 years were on the Atlantic island of Eris, off the coast of Mayo, the most westerly, most isolated, most ocean-facing of the 3 stages, where the Atlantic arrived without interruption from the Americas, and the world felt not hostile, but simply enormous and indifferent and old. At the end of the 900 years, a bell rang. St. Mockhomhog's bell, the specific, Christian, period-ending, world-changed bell that the tradition uses to mark the boundary between the mythological age and the historical age. The children heard it and were transformed back into their human forms. Old. Very old. 900 years old in human bodies, with a specific, tissue-deep, bone-deep, all the accumulated time-arriving quality of a body that is finally told it can stop holding the transformation. Mockhomhog baptized them. They died shortly after. Not as tragedy. The tradition insists on this. The children's death is not a tragedy because they die as themselves, in their own bodies, having completed their 900-year duration with their love for each other intact. The tragedy was the duration. The transformation was the catastrophe. The reunion and the death are the resolution. The specific, completed, nothing left unfinished quality of a story that has run its full length. They were buried together, standing up. In the tradition of the old Irish warriors, buried upright, facing the enemy, carrying their dignity into whatever came next. Their names are still on the land. Innisglúair, the island of Eris, the specific, Atlantic, last before the open ocean island off the Mayo coast, still carries the memory of the children in its landscape. The lake of Deravarig still sits in Westmouth, still and cold and clear, the kind of lake that makes you lower your voice when you stand at its edge. Because something happened here. Something that lasted 900 years and changed nothing about the love at its center. And the love at its center is still present. In the still, cold, clear water. In Fionn Waller's rock. In the decision that is made in the dark when the storm comes and there is no warm shore, and the only available warmth is the warmth you make yourself. The bell is not ringing tonight. The storm is not breaking tonight. The rock is not needed tonight. Tonight you are on the warm shore. And the water is still. There is a story told on every island and every coast of Ireland. Not the same story in every place. The specific details shift with the geography, with the dialect, with the particular emotional preoccupation of the community that tells it. But the same shape, the same central image, the same ending that is simultaneously a loss and a return, simultaneously a grief and a relief, simultaneously the saddest thing in the story and the only possible conclusion that leaves the central figure intact. A seal comes to the shore. At night. When the tide is at its specific, low water, full moon stillness and the rocks are exposed and the kelp glitters in the moonlight and the sound of the sea is the specific, slow, deep, regular breathing sound of the sea at rest. The sea between swells, the sea in the pause between one breath and the next. The seal comes to the shore and removes its skin. Underneath the seal skin is a woman. She dances on the rock, in the cold moonlight, on the wet stone, in the specific, private, nobody is, watching way that the body moves when it has been confined too long in a form that is not quite its own and has been given for one night the specific gift of returning to itself. She dances because the movement is the self. Because the body's uninstructed expression of its own aliveness is the truest thing it can do, and she has been away from it, has been in the seal form, in the cold water, in the deep dark of the ocean, for long enough that the dancing is not performance. It is homecoming. A man sees her. A fisherman, usually. A man from the shore community whose relationship with the sea is practical and economic and daily, and who does not, in his daily relationship with the sea, encounter its specific, mythological, otherworld-adjacent quality, except in the moments that the tradition calls the thin places. The moments when the ordinary world and the other world are separated by less than usual, and what is normally invisible becomes briefly, shockingly, undeniably visible. He hides her skin. This is the catastrophe of the Selkie story, and it is accomplished in a single sentence, in a single action, in the specific moment of a man's hand closing over something that does not belong to him and the specific, consequential, everything that follows decision not to put it back. He hides her skin, and she cannot return to the sea. Without the skin, the transformation is incomplete. She is stranded, not entirely in her human form, not entirely in her seal nature, but in the specific, in-between, neither fully here nor fully their condition of someone who has been separated from the part of themselves that makes them most themselves. She is present in her human body. She is functional. She speaks and eats and sleeps, and in some versions of the story she marries the fisherman, and has children with him, and tends the house, and walks the shore, and by all external measure appears to be living a complete human life. But she is always looking at the sea. This is the myth's most precise psychological observation. Not a mythological fantasy, but a description of a recognizable human condition. The person who is present in the life they are living, but not entirely in it. The person whose body is here and whose voice is here, and whose daily actions are all accounted for, but whose attention is consistently pulled toward something that is somewhere else, toward a part of themselves that the circumstances of their life have not allowed full expression, toward the sea of their own deepest nature that the inland life they are living cannot reach. The seal woman is not unhappy in any dramatic sense. She is simply not completely herself. And not being completely yourself, the specific, chronic, low-grade, daily negotiation between the life you are living and the life that would allow the part of you that is most essentially you to be fully expressed, produces a specific, recognizable, life-draining tiredness. Not the tiredness of too much activity. The tiredness of too much suppression. The tiredness of a body that has been holding itself in a form it was not born for. You know this tiredness. Every person who has spent a significant period of their life being less than fully themselves, being the version of themselves that the job required or the relationship required or the family expected or the specific, social, identity-suppressing demands of the communities they moved through produced, knows this tiredness. It is not the tiredness that sleep cures. It is the tiredness that only the removal of the suppression cures. The tiredness that lifts when you are, for a moment or an evening or a whole beautiful day, completely, uncomplicatedly yourself. The Selkie feels this tiredness for years, sometimes decades in the telling, until one day, in some versions the children find the skin, in some versions she finds it herself in the chest where he hid it, in some versions he leaves it out deliberately because even he has understood at last what hiding it has cost. She finds the skin. She picks it up. She holds it for a moment in the specific way that you hold something you have been without for a long time, not frantically, not in the desperate, grabbing, hold it before it disappears way of someone afraid of losing it again. Carefully, with both hands, with the specific, deliberate, I know what, this is quality of someone who is allowing themselves to fully understand what they are holding before they do what they are going to do with it. She goes to the sea. The story does not dwell on the departure. It does not make it dramatic. The tradition understood that dwelling on the departure would make it a tragedy, would shift the emotional weight of the story toward the loss experienced by the fisherman and the children, toward the grief of those who are left rather than the return of the one who leaves. And the tradition's compassion is firmly, specifically, deliberately with the Selkie. The seal goes back to the water, the specific, cold, dark, salt water, the water that is the medium of her truest nature, not the best medium for human life, not the warmest or the most comfortable or the most socially connected environment, but hers, the water that she was made for, the water in which her movement is the natural expression of her body's specific, evolved, perfectly calibrated capability, rather than a constant negotiation with a gravity and an air and a terrestrial environment that her nature was never built for. She becomes herself again. The water receives her, the specific, cold, salt, dark, receiving quality of the sea at night, the sea that asks nothing, that requires no explanation, that has been here since before you were born and will be here after you are gone, and that accommodates the body that enters it with a complete, impersonal, utterly accepting indifference of an element that does not need you to be anything other than what you are. The sea does not care who you were on the shore. It simply receives the weight of you and holds it. This is what you are moving toward tonight. Not the sea in the geographical sense, not the Atlantic off the Mayo coast, not the cold dark water of the Straits of Moyle. The internal sea, the specific, deep, quiet, tide-regulated, storm-capable, but currently still interior body of water that your sleeping brain produces when the day's shore life requirements have been met, and the skin, your skin, the specific, daily worn, roll-shaped, obligation-carrying form that the day required you to inhabit, can be set down. The Selkie sets her skin down every night. Not the seal skin, the human skin, the skin of the day, the specific, performed, carefully managed, socially legible version of yourself that the waking world requires, the you that has a name that other people use and a role that other people expect and a face arranged for the specific, social, constantly interpreted business of being a person among other people. That skin can be set down now. Not permanently. Not in the way of the Selkie returning to the sea and never returning to the shore. Just for tonight. For the specific, temporary, tide-regulated duration of the night. The old people of Ireland understood that sleep was a visit to the other world, not a metaphor for rest. A genuine nightly visit, the soul leaving the body in the same way that the Selkie leaves the shore, crossing the equivalent of the ninth wave into the territory where time moves differently and the specific, mortal, daytime requirements of being a complete person are suspended and something older and truer and less complicated can move freely. Every night you cross the ninth wave. Every morning you come back. The soul returns, as Oshin returned, carrying something of the otherworld's amber light in the specific morning quality of a body that has slept well, in the slight but real difference between the person who went to sleep and the person who woke up, in the specific, overnight, cellular and neurological and emotional work that the crossing always does. The old Irish knew about this work. They had names for the different qualities of sleep: the heavy sleep of the body replenishing itself after physical labor, the light sleep of the mind, processing the day's social encounters, the deep sleep from which you returned carrying fragments of the other world in the specific, half-remembered, not quite graspable quality of the dream that fades as soon as you try to hold it. The dream that fades is the other world receding behind the ninth wave as you cross back. Still there, just behind the wave, closer than you think. If this gentle hour of Irish mythology, of the Tuatha Dé Danann arriving in their dark cloud, of Oisin on the white horse crossing the ninth wave, of Fionn Waller on her rock in the storm of the Straits of Moyle, of the Selkie finding her skin at the shore, has been useful to you tonight, has helped the day's shore life requirements soften into the specific, tide-turning, skin-setting-down quality of the hour before sleep, then I would gently invite you to subscribe, or to leave a thought below, about which part of this stayed with you longest. Whether it was the Dagda's cauldron that produced exactly enough, or Niamh's horse crossing the ninth wave, or Fionn Waller spreading her wings over her brothers in the storm, or the Selkie returning to her cold dark sea. It helps other people find their way here, other people at the edge of their own crossing, also ready to set the skin down, one wave at a time. And if sleep is still arriving slowly, if the tide is still on its way, there is another night of stories waiting. Another fire, another voice close beside you in the dark, carrying the old tales from the oldest island in the northwest of the world. It will be there when you need it. But for now, feel the weight of your body where it meets the surface beneath you. This is the shore, the specific, solid, receiving surface of the shore that holds the body while the soul makes its crossing. The shore does not ask anything of you. It simply holds you while the tide turns. Allow your shoulders to soften now, the way the seal woman softens when she feels the water, not collapsing, not surrendering, just releasing the specific muscular effort of being on land into the specific water-supported, weightless ease of a natural element. Let the surface beneath you do what the sea does for the Selkie. Hold you, without requiring anything in return. Allow your jaw to unclench. Allow your hands to open. Allow the skin of the day, the name-wearing, role-carrying, face-arranging skin that the waking world requires, to settle at the shore's edge. You are crossing tonight, not in any direction that requires effort. Just across, into the place where time is amber, and the feast is always full, and Fionn Waller is singing on the lake at Derravarrig, and the music heals everything it touches, and the old language is in the mist, and the island is breathing, and the ninth wave is behind you. You are in the other world now, as you have been every night, as you have always been, in the specific, nightly, tide-returning, skin-setting-down way of a creature that belongs to two worlds and crosses between them every night without fanfare, without drama, without any need for a white horse or a druidic wand. Just the crossing. Just the dark, just the tide. Before the first stone was laid on the first wall of the first house in Ireland, the island already had a name, and the name it had was not for the island. It was for this crossing, this dark, this warmth, this specific, nightly, unhurried return to the place you always were. Innis Fail, the island of destiny. You have always been here. Sleep well, and good night.